Well, from the Astra Awards red carpet to my show, we have a special guest, Trisha LaFache. I don't temper your expectations, but we're here to talk about a few different things. Our guest has been in films such as God Is Not Dead 1 and 2, favorite movies here in our home. Also, she was part of the and recently celebrated for her role on the Emmy and Golden Globe-nominated series Jury Duty last year with James Marsden. I mean, that we'll talk about that at the end here, but she has a podcast called The UnBorn, which is currently ranking on the iHeart podcast radio charts. She's here with us today. Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to meet you, Trisha. Thank you so
Pleasure to
much.
meet you as well, Brett. Thank you for having me.
And also Garden State. We can't forget about that. You've been a part of so many great products. So this podcast is so interesting. I always find true crime very fascinating.
Yeah.
Now you will probably do a much better job of explaining this, but it's about a story that took place in Avela, Pennsylvania in 2020. How did
Yes.
you kind of become involved with this? And not kind of, but I mean, this is huge.
Yes. My husband had a friend. My husband is a writer as well as myself, and we're always trying to find stuff that makes sense for us to work on together. And a friend of his just called him out of the blue and happened to be physically with one of the major players in the story and was like, "You're not going to believe what happened to this kid. It's playing out basically right in front of me." And we thought it was wild and we were so interested. And so we asked, would he jump on a call with us? And so the next day we were on the call with Jared, the gentleman who is the main subject matter of the podcast. And then within a couple months, we flew him out here and we did, 4 days of interviewing with him and then supplemental interviews with whoever would talk to us pretty much. I'm still kind of begging for interviews. I'm like, anybody call you? Does anybody want to talk to? But I mean, there's quite a bit, but there's always just seems to be more to the story. And, I really felt I love true crime, like absolutely fanatic, but I am sensitive about, telling the story kind of just from his point of view. So I was very interested in finding people that knew her and maybe could shed some light on the how did this happen and not just focus on the salaciousness of what happened because it is pretty, ripped from the headlines type stuff.
Well, you come from a legal background, so it would stand to reason like why this might be fascinating for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me, I was just researching that M. Night Shyamalan show on Apple TV Plus. The name always escapes me, where there's a woman who fakes, do you know what I'm talking about? She fakes the pregnancy. I can't, I will waste our time trying to think of it. I might person here kind of search this up. But anyway, this is an actual thing that people create, right? Where they do this. There's like a psychological name for this. And the thing about true crime that I always find interesting is like it is a little bit hard sometimes to get people to talk about this because, there's the anonymity thing and having interviewed a lot of true crime types on the show,
Yeah.
people don't always necessarily want to talk about it because it can be hard to get information and represent people accurately, which you've done. So I think that sort of adds to the fun of all of this for sure.
Yes. I mean, that it's funny because it's in my experience, it's everybody who, first of all, everybody comes in thinking they don't want to talk, right? And then they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk. But once they're there, do you know what I mean? It's mostly getting them to agree to sit for the interview, which is the hardest part because once they're there, they are just like truth serum takes over and they just spill the beans.
Yeah. Very interesting. So when you start doing this, Servant, that's the name of the show. Anyway,
Oh, okay. See, I wouldn't remember. I always say I'm name blind. I'm not
I
face.
know I'm the
I'll
same way.
remember
Like,
everybody's. face, but no.
I could be speaking to the world's most famous person and I will not remember the project that they're in. And it's
Yeah.
horrible because I look like I'm so unprepared. I was like,
And what did you say
um,
it's called? I want to check it out.
servant. It's and
Servant.
anyway, the story is about a woman who fakes a pregnancy because she's lost her real child that's happened like 10 years prior, but all these weird things start happening and it's based on true events. That's the first thing that this made me think of.
Yeah.
Um, so when you put these episodes out, it takes a while, yeah, I would imagine, because you're fact finding, gathering information. It's
Yes.
not like this where we'll turn and burn and this will be out later tonight.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it took 4 years. So
Maybe not tonight, maybe tomorrow. We'll see. Before Christmas, I promise.
there was I was actually trying to send you a photograph of her to put it in the chat, but it says it won't let me. The I could always email it to you. That's one of the reasons we decided to do a podcast. My husband was really hot on the idea that he felt that it would be good as a podcast, and I had done a true crime podcast before, but it was a comedic podcast. It was about a kind of funny trial that happened in Manhattan in 1993 when Marla Maples' publicist stole her shoes.
Yes, I
I don't
remember that.
Yes. So that was kind of a comedic podcast, it's a talk podcast just with myself and the other host who was actually the prosecutor in the case. And this was such a different endeavor, but because it was COVID, we wanted to make something. We were very kind of had cabin fever and nothing was being bought and sold. Meetings weren't really happening, going on set. I mean, we shot jury duty in COVID, but much later in COVID than we did the beginning
Right.
of the UnBorn. Things were a lot more lax. So we thought, okay, this is a way to do something that we can control and do it together and do it now. And, not wait for notes and approval and budget. And, so we just and then we continued to interview people. And then last May, we actually went to Avela and did a whole another round of interviews. Because as you're talking about the servant, the thing that's crazy, I hate to use that word, but the thing that is fascinating about what happened with Kristy is that, and this is why I was trying to put the picture in the chat. If you see her, she looks pregnant, and
Yeah,
people
no,
look at
I just
her
Googled it. Yeah, she looks very pregnant.
and they say, that, oh, she must have been stuffing. No, she's a 23-year-old farmer. She wasn't walking around with a pad in her body. Her body actually tricked itself into believing that she was pregnant so that her period stopped. Her breasts enlarged. She had cravings. She had a slowly developing belly. In fact, Jared's mother and Kristy's best friend remember when her belly even dropped, which is
Oh
like a
God.
phrase, right? You have kids, so you know what that phrase is. Anyways, so there's that component of it, right? But then there's the other component where she's ordering sonograms with her name on them and posting them at a gender reveal. She's having a gender reveal. She's um, returning car seat. Like she's doing things that showed that she knew that she wasn't pregnant. Now, unless we speak to her, and even if we did, I don't know if she would tell us the truth. But what fascinates me is, did she have a split personality? Were there times of the day where she fully believed she was pregnant when she was typing and posting on Facebook, babies are the size of a kumquat, babies are the size of plums, babies popped off mom's sciatic nerve. You know what I mean? Like, what was the balance of reality because the body went along with it, so that's what fascinates me because in true, in pseudocyesis, everybody that we've spoken to, which is a phantom pregnancy, a false pregnancy, a belief that you're pregnant when there is no uterus, I'm sorry, no fetus in your uterus. Every other story that person we've spoken to about it, once the woman sees the ultrasound and is faced with, this is what it looks like, they start to process that this is not real. We couldn't find anybody else who went a full 9 months, let alone broke into a hospital to give birth, so yeah.
That is wild. Yeah, I mean, I have experienced a pregnancy with my son's mother, and there are things that happen throughout that 9 months that, you know, but I have heard, I'm not an expert in any way,
Right,
shape, or form. I'm an entertainment reporter, but
right.
I've talked to enough people who have done and been in this world to know that, like, it can happen. Like your body can be tricked into, having cancer or like pregnancies or, all of these different things.
Yeah.
And so, and then they turn into true crime series, podcasts, or television shows.
All of the above, please. But yes, yep.
Yeah, and then I wind up talking to them. It's just interesting, how it all processes. So, where did the jump happen from being, involved in the legal world? Because I did research, and you have consulted on many television shows as a legal consultant.
Yes.
Like, is that how it started for you? And then you find yourself in front of the camera, or did the chicken come before the egg, or the egg come before the chicken?
So as a child, I was always a performer, acting, got really, really into ballet, danced all over the country, New York City Ballet, Boston Ballet, San Francisco Ballet, Pittsburgh Ballet, and in the summer programs. And then I got injured. And when I went to college, I majored in political science and theater. And I really just wanted to be an actor. But I went to law school to maintain my father's love because he is a lawyer, a really wonderful criminal defense attorney and general practitioner, and really wanted me to be a lawyer. And I ended up auditioning for Yale for the master's program. And I was like still crying during my comedic monologue. And she like handed me a tissue, like leave. And I was like, I can't do it. So I signed up for law school. And then in my very first week at law school, I bumped into a kid who had an agent because I went to Brooklyn Law School, which is the Princeton of nowhere, but it is in New York City. And
The Princeton of nowhere.
yeah, and so I got an agent. I was like, well, if he's got an agent, I think I can get one. And so I started acting professionally in law school. And and then it keeps snowballing, right? I ended up getting hired by the Brooklyn DA because I went into class and did my opening statement and my closing statement in trial advocacy. And I just so happened to have the Brooklyn DA as my teacher. He called me in the hallway because, I'm an actor, right? So he's like, you're hired. Come work for me. And I was like, no, I want to book a pilot, so it was I didn't end up going to the DA's office. I was going to do it, but we got postponed. And by the time it was time for us to go, I was knee deep in this other federal case, but I was also working a lot as an actor in New York. And so it was a really fabulous time in my life that I was doing both. I actually loved law school and I loved being a lawyer. It's just that I love this stuff even more, which shows you how much I love this. So yeah, I came to LA. I started working for an attorney and I slowly started teaching acting at a studio in Hollywood and kind of moved away towards federal criminal defense because, somebody walking in handing you their sides from Two and a Half Men and, you walk out with $90 a half hour later. It's like, this is legal drug money. This is no work whatsoever. I don't have to worry about how much time the guy's going to get. All I have to do is say, good luck and, never think about you again. And so in that, I always knew that I wanted to, the first thing I ever wrote was based on a federal criminal death penalty trial I had in Brooklyn. And I wrote it as a play and then I changed it into a pilot. And I love to do everything that has to do with law. I would play a lawyer on TV for the rest of my life if I could.
Are you familiar with Emily D. Baker, who does, she covers trials, but she does it from an entertainment perspective. Uh,
I'm not. I probably should be, or maybe I should
yeah, you
reach out
should
to
look
her.
her up on YouTube. She covers everything. And she's also done a little bit of acting. But I've talked to other people who have kind of done that, even recently, who he was in the assistant DA's office for years and years, and then in LA, and then since left because of the political climate changes, and now does acting full time. So when you get jury duty, are you hired to be an actor, or are you hired to be? And I know it was last year, but it's still a very popular show.
Yeah.
It's crazy to watch. Like, it was good for the guy that they brought in to be on the jury, but when I watch this, I just think to myself, how does he not know what's going on? Like, it's so silly and fun and convoluted,
Yeah.
How did you get hired as a consultant, or did they hire you as an actor and then they realized who you were?
So how he didn't know was that, my scenes are boiled down to like 4 or 5 minutes of the whole episode, but we did a 21-day trial, 6.5 hours of court a day. So there was a lot of court that you don't get to see. And I knew that was the case going in. Obviously, I read the scripts and I could tell that that was what was going to happen, but I didn't really know anything except for the breakdown said that she was, a tough plaintiff's attorney who kind of had a chip on her shoulder. And I was like, well, if I can't book this, I should have quit years ago.
You're like, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. So I had to write a monologue arguing why John Wilkes Booth was not guilty of assassinating Abraham Lincoln. And I came up with this whole argument about eyewitness testimony and what Mrs. Lincoln had been going through. And if she, if they wanted me, if they forced me to call her to the stand, I would have to ask her about her time spent in the sanitarium and I wouldn't want to embarrass the first lady and, all this and all that. And then I don't hear anything. And I was like, okay, this is not even a callback. Like, what? And then I looked on Vimeo. You can see how many times your video has been played. And it was like 15 or 16 times. And I was like, well, what are they doing? Making fun of me? Like, how do you watch something 16 times? And then that day that I had checked the Vimeo, I got the offer, the Avela check. And then the next day they said that Amazon approved me. The breakdown said legal experience a must. Right. And so sometimes they'll say legal experience preferable, or, that said a must. But unless you had actually done a trial before, you would never have been able to do. So I get there, and when, we do the rehearsal, like the run through of the script for the pilot, and then they said, can you join the producers for a meeting afterwards? And they're like, hey, so, we don't have a lot of ideas for this case, because they spent so much time coming up with like how to move him around and writing the script of like what happens in each episode. That was all already beat out. But then we started the process of building the case, and they pretty much let me do whatever I wanted, unless I went too far with trying to win, because they still needed a gray area. And so I would always like, can we let his alcohol level be, 0.8? And they're like, no, it's got like, it can be like 0.008. And I'm like, ah. But, I had to prepare all my witnesses and write my opening statement, my direct examinations, and I think it was like 12 or 14 witnesses. And, we had the producers and I came up with this crazy, crazy scientific, technological reason why the printer broke. None of it made air. Okay. But if you could know how much time we spent on all of those tweets. I wrote all those tweets, those mean tweets, because I decided to use, that would be a fun thing to put in my client's direct examination. So I just asked them, can you make these big tweets? And they said yes. And I wrote them. And yeah, it was a completely amazing experience. Yeah. I
And then,
felt
of
like I had
course,
power.
yeah, Ike and John Barinholtz, his father,
Allan.
Allan was your judge when we
Yes.
spoke to John Barinholtz about American Auto. He was talking about how much fun his dad had, and it
Yes.
just very cool stuff.
And Allan was a big, I mean, Allan is like, a second father to me now. He and his wife, Peggy, we go out, my husband and I go out to eat with, like, we're obsessed, but he was an obstacle. I mean, he helped me a lot, but it was also an obstacle because I knew that if I would objected, he would be like, what's your grounds, counselor? So I would have to articulate the grounds for the objection, and then he was gonna sustain or overrule me based on. So there'd be some times where my earpiece would be going off, and my director would be going, object, 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 but the defendant would have a character witness on there, so there'd be nothing to object to, but they just wanted to kill some time or something. So one time I jumped up and I was like, Judge, I'm going through IVF and I'm really sick and I just need to use the bathroom. And so he's like, go, go, go. So he busts into the control room, Allan, and she's like, she's sick. Stop everything. And like my director, Jake, is cracking up because he's like, she's acting. He's like, no, she's not. She told me. And she's like, Judge, she's acting.
What a wild life you live. Last question. Any cases that you can talk about that you worked on that stood out to you that might have gotten some public attention while you're balancing your legal career versus your acting career? Anything that you is memorable to you?
Well, the first big case I ever worked on was a terrorism case in Manhattan, in New York City, in federal court. I say terrorism in quotes because honestly, a lot of my clients were guilty because it's the feds. It's not like cops and robbers will figure it out. No, they follow you for 7 or 8 years before they, indict you. So a lot of times it's more of a distillation thing of like, okay, what can they prove? Or also like what is true, but a lot of it is, so there's a lot of mitigation, but this guy was not a terrorist. He truly wasn't. And in fact, when we went to trial, the prosecutor opened up and said, this is a conspiracy to kill and kidnap where no persons were conspired against or kidnapped. And they still convicted him. But that case, yes, I was on Law and Order as a guest star, and doing Garden State because I got Garden State my like 3rd or 4th week of law school, like right when I first got an agent. It was my first job ever. And I got locked in the Metropolitan Correctional Center with my client because he was a terrorist. I couldn't visit him in general population, so I had to go to the special housing unit, and the lieutenant locked the door as they do and never came back. So I was in there for like 15 hours.
Oh my God.
It made the New York Times. And I was like, but my boss would not give them my name because he was worried about me. He's since passed. But yeah, that case was newsworthy because my client's co-defendant was the lawyer to Sheikh Abdel Rahman, who was convicted of the 1993 second World Trade Center bombing, which was a conspiracy to blow up the Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, and George Washington Bridge. Obviously, that didn't happen, thank God. And her co-counsel was Ramsey Clark, who's a former U.S. Attorney General, and her lawyer was Michael Tiger, who represented the Unabomber. So that case got a lot of attention, quite a bit of attention when we were on it.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. And of course, calling back to the podcast UnBorn.
Yeah.
How often do you release episodes?
So every Tuesday, an episode comes out on iHeart or Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever, Pandora, wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. It's a great time to check it out because the first 6 episodes are streaming or available. And then this Tuesday, the final episode, number 7, will come out. And so you can catch all the way up right before the last one comes out.
Yes. And of course, God Is Not Dead, 1 and 2, where you play Amy Ryan. Just such a great series of films. And of course, Ernie Hudson.
Who I just gave the award to the other day.
Yeah, very cool. Always cool stuff. And of course, Jury Duty on Prime Video. Thank you for your time. Happy holidays to you. And thanks for hanging out. I really do appreciate it very much.